Yes. Evolving with the cosmos. The cosmos is full beyond measure of elegant truths, of exquisite interrelationships, of the awesome machinery of nature. The surface of the earth is the shore of the cosmic ocean. On this shore, we've learned most of what we know. Recently, we've waded a little way out, maybe ankle deep, and the water seems inviting. Some part of our being knows this is where we came from. We long to return, and we can, because the cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself. Carl Sagan.
Wonderful. Welcome, everyone, to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle, sponsored by Still and Moving Center on these Saturday afternoons. And welcome to the first meeting of 2026, in which our theme for the year, as Carolyn mentioned, is evolving with the cosmos. And we'll have the opportunity to read that section from the back cover of the Still and Moving Center Almanac, which looks like this on the front and like this on the back. And the quote by Carl Sagan is the one that will precede each of our conversations with for this year. I'm so happy to say that we have with us today someone who I believe is especially made of stardust. She is a dear friend for many, many years. She is someone who really thinks scientifically, thinks mathematically. She was of tremendous help to all three of our kids in their studies along those lines in elementary school and probably beyond. She's taught both math and science, and she has done a lot in terms of astronomy and the stars. And one of her high school students was even able to go on and become a professional astronomer, thanks to a lot of coaching along the way by Kim. So she's somebody who really, I think, can relate to this topic that we have today. She and I decided that rather than asking her to prepare something for us, maybe we would just have an initial little conversation between the two of us, something like a little interview, and then we would go on to open it up to everybody for conversation. And maybe what I will do, since our initial quote is from Carl Sagan, and we're going to use his thoughts as something of a launching pad, is maybe, Kim, could you tell us a little bit about Carl Sagan, who he was in American culture and so on?
Well, sure. He was a scientist who made very popular ideas about the Earth's place in the universe and humanity's place in the cosmos. He realized there was a great need for popular science education. And so he actually led a TV series called Cosmos, which some of you may remember. It played, I don't know when, 70s and 80s, I believe. Yeah, I didn't prepare a complete biography of him, but basically he's well known as the person who kind of coined the phrase that made it popular, that we are all made of star stuff. He made a good connection between the understandings that scientists were gaining about the universe and what it actually meant to a human being right here, right now on planet Earth. So we have him to thank for for that phrase, we are all made of star stuff, and the idea that humanity is an integral part of nature. I mean, not that he didn't found that idea. That's very common, but he made it acceptable in the scientific education field to state that explicitly, that humans are not separate from nature, we're part of it. And so like that quote on the back there, it's an example of how humans are a meaningful part, the conscious part, he would say, of nature learning more about itself.
Mm-hmm. So I think when we think of evolution, a lot of times from a Darwinian perspective, we're usually thinking about how different life forms evolve into more and more complex forms, and we do think about how there's a capacity for intelligence that becomes possible with these more complex forms. When we look at this last sentence of the paragraph that we read from Carl Sagan, it says, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." We are a way for the cosmos to know itself. Which I think for this coming year is really going to be essential in our consideration of what does it mean to be evolving with the cosmos. Within any one lifetime, for example, we're not going to notice ourselves probably doing a lot of changing of forms and looking differently. But is it not still possible for us to, from the standpoint of consciousness, be evolving with the cosmos? So, Kim, do you have some thoughts along those lines that you might want to share with us?
Well, yeah, as an individual person, our consciousness evolves in the direction of our focus. And so it seems like that's a critical thing to remember for ourselves, that what we turn our attention to becomes more manifest in our lives. That's in psychology, you can see this as a truth, but it's found throughout many fields of study that what one focuses on, what one holds in one's awareness, becomes more easily approached by, I mean, physically in the brain, even. I mean, a scientist would say that the more one tracks along a certain line of thinking, the more one is applying phosphorylates to brain channels. The neurons are getting, and the signals are getting more and more physically embedded in the brain, so that then that kind of thought will trigger a concatenation of thoughts more easily. So that points to the need for us to be intentional about our thinking, because we will then create the human being that we focus upon. In the Renaissance, there were the Neoplatonists who would speak about how man is kind of flexible. And for example, Pico della Mirandola, in his oration on the dignity of man, he spoke about how man has components of the most beastly creatures on up to the most angelic, and what man focuses upon is what he will become. That humanity has potential to become pretty much anything in the scale of being, Pico della Mirandola says. And um, that potential makes him even more, in a sense, more potent than the angels, because the angels have a fixed destiny, according to the Platonic or Neoplatonist thought that their destiny is to be angelic, and that's what they're going to do. But humanity has the potential to even go beyond the angels, Pico della Mirandola says, through refinement of thought, refinement of feeling, enabling that feeling nature to become more universal, and less selfish, and uh, refinement of the will. So this creates a beautiful potential that humans have, a special place in the universe, according to Pico della Mirandola. So that's one example of the freedom of consciousness that we have to become whatever we focus upon. Um, Now, Carl Sagan, being a scientist, would say that the consciousness that we have is an emergent property of the brain. The materialistic scientists do not admit of a spiritual nature. They would say it's all based in physical. But if we think about it, in a way, it doesn't matter. In my opinion, it doesn't matter because if Carl Sagan and others are talking about a kind of a continuity of being between humans and the universe, then so we are physically formed of the universe's stuff. He connects it with the fact that our physical form comes from elements generated within stars. So there's a continuity between star stuff and ourselves. And so that material that came out of stars has evolved into a very detailed structure of a brain. If a materialistic scientist says, well, then that brain uh, creates a mind, well, in a sense, to me, that's okay if they're going to say that, because they're saying consciousness is not alien from nature. It's evolved from nature. It's all part of nature, that there's spirit matter in a sense that's all one. And if that's the case, there's there's evidence. I mean, there's that's in line with the Eastern teachings too, of spirit matter being one. So I'm okay with it. If scientists are going to be very materialistic, because the idea is that self-reflection of humans is part of cosmic activity, and that's a beautiful thing. That our own mental activity of inquiry, of discovery, of experimentation is a way that the material of the universe gains self-knowledge, and it's an integral part of cosmic processes. And it could also happen not just on Earth. Um, this is why I think, here, I'm going to hold up this picture from Carl Sagan's book, Cosmos, right here. In it, he has that famous picture right here of the Earth from the moon. And, you know, when this image came back from the Apollo missions, it was so transformative across the globe, for people to see this little skin of surface area of the Earth being the entire locus of our human conscious activity. Everything that we're involved in is right here. But, you know, Carl Sagan was pointing out it doesn't have to be just here. It could be elsewhere. There could be alien intelligence elsewhere emerging, and that consciousness is an emergent part of nature. But it's a rare thing, he was saying, so we should take care of it and see this as our Earth as a precious instance of a location for responsibility for thinking, for kind of a cosmic responsibility for consciousness, not to mess it up on our planet. Even though there may be other loci in space and time where alien intelligence is growing, alien to us, and therefore being a place where the cosmos can know more about itself, still we have a precious ethical responsibility to enable conscious human life to continue and not botch up our blue planet, our planet Earth. Uh, so I don't know. Those are some thoughts. I don't know if they answer any of your question.
I think I heard you say that even if you look at things from a materialistic science point of view, these brains of ours that scientists all agree are made like all the rest of us of things that have come from the stars. These brains of ours, made of star stuff, are pondering these thoughts about the universe and our place in the universe in a way that can be ever more expansive. I mean, I think most scientists would think that our consciousness is becoming more evolved in some ways. It can do things that we can do things that we weren't able to conceive of before. We can conceive of these things now, thanks to, for example, people like Einstein. And so it's our star stuff, maybe, that is thinking them, and so that's okay with you as a perspective. I'm really hoping over the course of this year that we're going to be looking a lot into the whole field of neuroplasticity. It's just such a absolutely fantastic field of science that to me is validating very clearly that the mind is what is controlling the brain rather than the reverse. And so many of the experiments that they have been doing seem to be pointing that direction. So I'm hoping, in terms of this idea of the cosmos evolving to know itself through us, that we'll be touching on that a little bit. Could you use that phrase you used right at the beginning of, you were saying that when we follow certain lines of thought, you said something like phosphates are laid down in the neurons of the brain. What did you say?
Phosphorylating brain channels.
What does that mean?
It's a phrase my chemist teacher used to say. You say, I really hope that you're phosphorylating some brain channels here when I do this, and then like he'll write up some chemical equation. So you've got to remember that. Make sure it goes into the brain. It's just a way that the neurons record information that they have already had a energy pattern go through them. It creates a chemical change that then is remembered in a sense. It's a physical mechanism for remembering.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really exciting.
And also when you were talking just now, it reminded me of about your neuroplasticity. It reminded me of the beautiful analogy of the fact of how cells are made structurally, that the DNA in a cell, any one cell in our body, is contains the whole genome of the entire, all the potential cells can be made from any one cell. So in a sense, it's called totipotent. It's all potent. The DNA in every cell is all potent. And, in research right now, of course, they're trying to figure out how to extract that DNA from, say, a skin cell and put it into an egg and then have it reproduce and become another being for cloning. But just the reason the cells differentiate is because of the proteins that monitor the reproduction of the DNA, all this really rapid unzipping of the spiral helix, replication of strands, turning those into proteins, and then the proteins get folded up and created and excreted by the cell. Uh, all of that happens regulated by proteins, in a sense, like the nannies of the DNA. The DNA is all potent, but there are monitors that tell it what to do. And if nobody tells a certain section of DNA to do anything, it won't. It'll just be latent. And so that again is an example of how our human or our activity of something, in this case it's a physical protein, but by analogy it could be the action of our thoughts, our mental states, can influence what is actually manifested in our bodies. And I think that relates to the neuroplasticity you're describing.
Yeah. Great. Um, Other thoughts on the evolving cosmos that you were hoping to maybe relay to us before we open it up, Kim?
Well, one thing that's interesting is energy. How we get energy. I just like to think about that sometimes. On Earth, the only energy source that we usually have is chemical energy, or the energy of combustion. Like, let's say we burn some wood and we think, oh, that's really hot. That's a lot of energy there. And yes, it is. Or burning fossil fuels. But the energy that's given off in the cosmos largely is from suns, from stars. And that's thermonuclear energy. That's the energy of fusion, where matter is actually transformed into energy. And Einstein told us, figured out that energy is equal to mass times the speed of light squared, which means a tiny little mass can create a huge amount of energy. And that energy of fusion from the stars is the most common form of energy in the universe that we know of. And in terms of evolution, you know, society's trying to figure out how to capture fusion as a source of energy, because it would be absolutely transformative for us to be able to do that, to convert from chemical combustion to nuclear fusion would be a huge change. It would mean that if we could control it, desert areas could be supplied with fresh water, because that energy could fuel desalination plants, could allow for, with global warming, every house to have an air conditioner. I mean, just in terms of technology evolving, the potential of nuclear fusion is very attractive. But by analogy, what is nuclear fusion for us? Spiritually, it's a transformation from the chemical energy, the body energy, the surface of the earth source of energy, to that energy supplied by what's transcendent beyond earth, the sun. There's an analogy there of gaining our source of inspiration and energy from that which is above and transcendent, the sun, rather than just on the turba of the earth. So I just wanted to invite us to consider that as a potent metaphor for what we might be attempting to do in our own lives.
Can you say it another way?
um, what are you saying, Kim? Well, it's the difference between waking up in the morning and turning on the artificial lights in your house and saying, I'm ready to go to work and perform abundantly and make money and make people proud of me. Okay, so there's that. And then there's, I've woke up. I'm going to go outside and be grateful to the sun it shines its abundant light upon all beings that allows us to foster a sense of harmony and joy. And I, as another being on this planet, am grateful for that light and want to help embody it on Earth and be a little source of shining light myself. So maybe that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, well, that's a great start for us with this topic for the week and for the year of evolving with the cosmos. And so I wonder what questions and comments the rest of us might want to bring up. Robert Moore.
Robert has a question. Kim, would there be life on Earth if we didn't have the sun? Would there be energy or?
Well, are you saying in this solar system, or are you
Yeah.
saying in any place on the universe without a sun, could there be life?
Well, let's limit it to our solar system.
Okay. Well,
I mean,
minus
it's kind of hard to imagine because we need the sun there for stability.
yeah,
The,
that's what I
our
was going to
life as
say
a
is,
planet means circling around the sun.
yeah.
I don't know what we'd do without it,
Well,
But
we'd go off in a tangent.
theoretically, though, say we had a gravitational center, but no light or heat from an external source, would science say there'd still be life on Earth?
Yes, scientists would probably say the deep sea vents would still have life, because in the deep sea vents there's hydrogen sulfide, which can be used as a source of energy. And so they don't need light. They don't have light, even. There is a little ecosystem down there. So
But
if
would they be?
volcanic vents,
But would the Earth be warm enough without the sun? Like the outer planets they're all
right?
ice planets.
Not on the surface, but in the depths of the ocean near the volcanic vents, yes. In fact, there's a moon of Jupiter called Io that is quite warm, and it's because it's having gravitational flexing. Its position in orbit around Jupiter causes it to squeeze and go like this, and so it has all this volcanic activity. It's very hot, whereas another moon of Jupiter, which is not too far different in its orbit, not too far, Europa is just ice. So anyway, my point being, for the most part, life would not exist on the surface of our Earth. Yeah, I mean, we need that sun to shed its solar radiation upon Earth and drive the energy, drive the ecosystem, really.
So this draws me to another question: is Robert Crosby says the great work of evolution proceeds from within outwards. Does science, the state of science, correspond with that proposition?
I don't think so. Because that would imply a teleology, an end in itself, and the current understanding of how physical evolution occurs is through having a diverse gene pool with random variants, and then having those which successfully reproduce in a given environment selected for favorable reproduction and continuation of that set of genes. So there's genetic pressure on populations that's coming more from it could be the environment, or I mean, it could be social structures even for humans that cause genetic changes. An example of that would be, people have said, well, if natural selection is all it is that's causing human populations to be how they are, then how is it that like gay people still exist? Because they would select themselves out. But then you socially look at how who's most likely to survive as a child in a group of people. The child with a lot of friendly aunts and uncles who care for it and who are free of the burden of taking care of children themselves, but love that child and want to take care of it, that kid is going to be more likely to survive. And they may carry some genetic component that tends towards the gay lifestyle or something. I mean, so that makes sense as a hypothesis for why that would continue in a population. Or if you look at like African populations, often they tend to have sickle cell anemia, but and this is well studied actually. It provides an advantage for surviving malaria. So there can be surprising things that happen with selection pressures. It's not all cut and dry like whoever's the biggest survives and whoever's the most badass fighter survives. It's not that. It could be some other cause. But modern science, I don't see as saying there's internal purpose to evolution. I'm sorry to say that. I wish I could say it. I've seen something else, but I don't see it yet. Now, maybe others have.
But I wonder if is what I've heard it. I haven't read this recently, but statistically, if you try and figure out statistically the probability of such random things developing life on Earth as we know it, I mean, it's outrageously rare statistically,
Are you talking about
probability wise.
primitive soup kind of thing?
Yeah,
Oh,
probability wise to end up with life on Earth as we know it,
yeah.
it's not probable.
Well, the thing is that modern science is going to not accept something that they can't test. It's the Karl Popper idea that any hypothesis should be testable and negatable. And if you say that there's some invisible force guiding evolution, how can you disprove that? If there can be no evidence of it not being true or not being the case, then it can't be tested. And they just want to have things they can test. That's the way it works. But it doesn't mean that they can't come up with some very inspiring ideas. Like, for example, it's almost like convergent evolution. Sharks and dolphins are from completely different sets of evolutionary history, but they look awfully alike. And Carl Sagan's quote in the back of the almanac here, coming from that scientific perspective, looks a lot like a spiritual idea right there. So who knows? It could be there deep inside.
Another one of the frontiers of science that seems very exciting to me is epigenetics. And so, according not only to external factors that we are exposed to, but also to internal choices that we make in terms of how we live our lives, like you were starting to point to, we are activating or not activating different possibilities from our own genetic code.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems as though that also points towards the idea of our evolving from within without
That's true.
on a
Good
personal
point.
basis, and that
Yes.
is part of today's science.
Yes, good point. I should have mentioned that, but I'm glad you did.
Well, can you explain how it works though better? Because I mean, I just know epigenetics and, opening and shutting gates of the cells or of the genetic code.
Yeah. Well, it's what I was talking about, where the DNA is regulated by proteins that manage its expression. But the interesting thing about epigenetics then is, how long do these changes last? You have one cell that's regulated in a certain way. It divides. Do its daughter cells be regulated in the same way? And epigenetics says yes, they are, which means that the body cells of a person over time can have that effect of early on regulatory changes. And in fact, I mean, you can see that in pathologies, like when people are exposed to early trauma, it's kind of lives in their body and it's hard to get out. So it can be an effect on a cellular level, and also then physiological traits can appear that are caused by those epigenetic changes. Um, let's
Kim,
see.
could you give
Yeah.
an actual example? And in this case, I'm going to ask you for a positive example of how somebody could make a change that would be explained by epigenetics, as they've made a lifestyle change, maybe even in the way that they're thinking, because I mean, there's lots of science that shows that, for example, people who have a more positive attitude in general tend to lead healthier lives, for example. But could you show how that would play out in terms of this idea of epigenetics?
I have to think about that. Can you give me a moment to think about it while you talk
Yeah,
about something else?
yeah. Unless, I think David's done quite a bit of study along these lines. Maybe he has something he can contribute here.
Oh,
Uh,
I may
Mary,
just confuse things. Go ahead. Sorry, Renee.
oh, I'm seeing that Mary is asking what is epigenetics. I can tell you that it's a line of scientific thought that's happening in today's science. And that, I mean, I can only tell you like the really dumbed down version, okay? And then somebody else can help us with it. But the dumbed down version is that when we went to school, most of us here on this Zoom call, we were told that you have the genes that you have, and tough luck, or good for you, great, you're lucky. But nowadays, through the study of epigenetics, there's this thought that different aspects of our genetic code will express itself or not express itself depending on what is happening to us environmentally on the outside, but also depending on lifestyle choices that we make. And according to certain lifestyle choices, bad, harmful ones, or positive, helpful ones, we will have different aspects of our genetic code express itself. And so within our own lifetimes, we can change what's going on with our genetic code, which when we went to school and we were learning science was not the case. That's my, simplified, super simplified version.
While you were talking, I asked ChatGPT because, hey, why not get some associative connections here? And so given that this is a machine connecting everything across the internet that it could possibly read about this, I asked, are there examples of how epigenetics can positively affect human life? That was my question, and I put it in the chat. It's AI's answer is yes. And then their examples are And then what is epigenetics? It's turning genes on or off without changing the DNA itself, like having the proteins read parts of the DNA and not others. Examples, the effect of exercise. Okay, so it's saying, pointing out, regular physical activity can change how the body handles sugars and fats, reduce inflammation, and reduce risk of heart disease and diabetes. Because there are genes that help muscles use energy more efficiently, and exercise allows those to be expressed, actually. And then it goes on, some other examples. It's helpful to have this jogger memory, yes. Read that in health class, you know. um, if in pregnancy a person takes the folates and the vitamin B, choline, and iron, that helps the genes in the fetus be expressed correctly and have normal brain development and growth. That's why prenatal vitamins are helpful, so helpful. And stress management, improving mental health. Anyway, it goes on. So those are some positive examples, Renee, right there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Still and Moving Center is just deeply involved with these. You know, it seems like that's what your whole focus is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
You're like an
So,
epigenetic center.
yeah, let's just call it that. So I'm curious, David, Diana, and Mary, are you at the Still and Moving Center doing these things? Is this part of your routine?
Well, for me, I do Tai Chi and I do this class, so I'm loving it. And I do think that you were talking about spiritual transformation happening and I think epigenetics is really important. I know nothing about it, so I'm just going to talk. But what comes to my mind, I think our spiritual transformation of what goes on in our body is very powerful because it's through our spiritual practices that we do bring our nervous system into balance and can work with our genetics and with what's happening, our genes, because of how we're living our life. So it seems to me that makes a lot of sense. And you were talking about something about spiritual transformation of chemical body energy. And they have shown that through Reiki and other energy medicines that it does transform pain and what's going on in the body. So that's just what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
It reminded me of Bruce Lipton's work in biology. He wrote a book called The Biology of Belief, which goes much bigger than this, but talking about previous to his work, the thought was that the nucleus of a cell determines the function of the cell. And what he was able to show was that it's not the cell doesn't perform according to it doesn't perform according to some script. What determines the function of the cell is the little feelers around the outside of the cell that are listening to its environment, just like we are listening to it. So it's sort of a molecular version of what you mentioned, but it's responding to its environment to determine what's needed out there that should then determine. Then the nucleus is basically just a library of
Yeah.
proteins that are able to turn this cell into whatever it is that's necessary according to its environment. So it's a very, in a sense, it's neuroplasticity at the molecular level. I love what ChatGPT said because I've been following this through and it knows me very well and I talk to it on a regular basis. But this idea of epigenetics, what it says is biology gives you a template, experience modifies the expression, consciousness chooses the experience, which means consciousness can influence biology all the way down to gene expression. Says that's not philosophy, it's molecular biology. Stress trauma, safety, meditation, love, breath, environment, attention. All these send chemical signals that turn genes on and off. So when a person practices, to mirror what Diana said, practicing mindfulness, self-compassion, relational repair, it's not just a coping mechanism, they're reprogramming the biological story that the genes are telling.
That's a nice way to put it. Yeah, if you look at the development of an insect, goes through, like, say, a segmented larval stage. All of those segments have the same DNA, but some evolve to become forearms, and others back legs, and others the part of the thorax, others the head with the feelers. And they study it going back to the egg itself, and within the egg, the fertilized egg, there's a field, a gradient of chemicals, and depending on how the egg starts to replicate, and some of those cells have more of that element that's in the gradient in the field than others. They have less. So those cells with more of this chemical that expresses a certain aspect of the DNA will express differently than the other cells. And so going way back to the egg, where there's a field, that's physically what scientists have found is a very great cause for the differentiation of how cells manifest themselves, how their regulation proteins develop because of this gradient within the egg. And I mean, that's interesting. Just metaphysically thinking about a unity and then beginnings of polarity within it, and a gradient that then allows for differentiation itself. And like what you're talking about is that we can, in a sense, through our action and our focus, manage that is quite a potent idea. I'm kind of mixing two things here, the interesting metaphysical connections and the beautiful points you were making, David. So forgive me, that didn't quite make sense.
I think that's this whole conversation is that, woo-woo. Where science falls short because of its limitation of being something that has to be tested and disproven in order for it to be the truth.
Yeah.
That's why it seems to me that these two fields of, cutting edge science, neuroplasticity, about how the mind can control the brain, and epigenetics, about how life choices that we make can affect our being at the genetic level, are really, it would seem to me, be challenging some of the assumptions of material science, and how that ties into our topic of evolving with the cosmos, is actually saying we're not just tied to evolving along with it. We can actually push it forward to the extent that human life makes any difference in the universe. To the extent that we make these positive changes in our lives that have that ripple effect outward, we are not just evolving with the cosmos, we're giving the cosmos, the evolution of the cosmos, a good little push, potentially, in a positive direction. Robert.
I think also the opposite is true. I think that things that we could do consciously might actually be slowing evolution down, and pushing it backwards.
Yes.
We see a lot of that going on right now, and I think here's where the contemplative sciences come into play. Is that I'll use yoga as an example. The purpose is to quiet the fluctuations of consciousness so that we can know our true nature, our spiritual nature. And our spiritual nature is all about the positive progression forward of evolution. But no, the power of the mind can be certainly used alternatively, you might say.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can I just jump in before Robert?
Yeah.
Uh, Carl Sagan really emphasized the ethical responsibility that humans have because we are self-reflective and we're the aspect of the universe that is self-reflective. Um, he asks, you can have wonder about the cosmos, but we need to have responsibility. Um, we have the capacity for self-reflection. We're emblematic of the universe self-reflecting in this point in space-time. So he emphasizes stewardship of the planet and humility, you know, uh, and then also compassion because we're trying to help matter evolve, he would say. That includes compassion to all beings and nurturing human consciousness to be as uplifted as possible and not go back down to the negative, like, is possible. But he has a very strong ethical component of our self-awareness.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Robert.
I, we live, humanity right now is very much the electronic age. It started with the light bulb. Now we have huge AI data banks. Um, we're so dependent on right now. It's like we couldn't communicate this constant electricity. So I wondered how that worked in with evolving with the cosmos.
How does the use of electricity work in with the evolving of the cosmos?
Well, there's been this whole evolution with the energy of electricity. How does that reflect evolution of the cosmos?
David, do you want to talk to that in terms of your ideas on AI?
It it didn't stir something in me just yet, but um, maybe if you ask it another way,
Well,
how?
I
Yeah.
could just say that evolution is not just structure, but it's also the use of energy. And so the more refined and detailed structures are, the more potential there is for energy to be routed in many different ways. And so it seems like with greater complexity of structure and energy comes uh, a greater use of energy, of the power. Um, the Tibetans have the idea of, well, of fohat, of power, or of a kind of energy. This is one aspect of that, and it would be as the cosmos evolves, it would be more imminent. Not just because there's a diversity of forms, but because there's so many different ways that they can interact. I mean, a simple example is on a prairie. If you have a single crop of plants, the biomass of that, the mass of all those plants is, let's say, X. But if you have a diversity of plants and lots of different microorganisms and little small mammals and buffalo walking along and embedding their feet deep into the soil, creating little areas of water to accumulate and have little frogs live in it. And then now you have diversity because you have all these different kinds of plants. If you measure the biomass of that same area, it would be much greater than just X. It would be, 3X or something like that. So there's more biological mass associated with more diversity, and so also more forms of energy, chemical energy when plants are eaten by a animal or decomposed by microorganisms or fungi. All of this is forms of energy transferring, and there's a greater amount of it with more diversity and more evolution.
You inspired a thought about this idea of maybe one of the definitions of entropy is that large rigid structures, complex structures, break down into finer subcomponents. And you see this in the world of computer programming. Programs used to be large masses of tons and tons of code, which had a single purpose. It would do what it was designed to do. And the evolution of programming now has broken these pieces down into small little kernels. This little piece can be called in to do printing of something, for example. And so the structures are breaking down into finer subcomponents, which then can be reconfigured in different ways. So that the level of, well, creativity, the things that can be constructed from this more refined set of components expands probably exponentially.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
That is, and that does sound as if it's pointing towards some sort of an evolution. So we can do so much more than with those little tiny components that we can reconfigure in all these different, more creative ways.
It's
The
the
cosmos
Legoland.
itself, right? Coming from that one mass that blew up, right? And the expansion outward is more and more structures with more and more possibility.
Very interesting. I think what I'd like to do, if I could, is ask everybody to share, if they'd like to, a takeaway. I'll tell you about our topic for the week of next week, and then I'll ask for somebody to give a vote of thanks to Kim. So the way it looks on my screen, it would be Robert, and then David, and Diana, and Carolyn, and Kim, and Mary. And I'm not sure if Skylar's able to tune in or not. I think she's been very busy at the front desk. Robert, do you have a brief takeaway that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, we have a choice, and our choices make a difference.
Lovely. Lovely.
Perfect. Can we
What
quote
he
you on
said.
that? David.
I can't top that. It's so perfectly. Yeah, I was looking for it, and that's exactly. Yeah, thank you, Robert.
Great. Diana?
You're muted.
Yep. I have to agree with you. I thought that was brilliant, Robert. And it really, for me, the takeaway is how important our thoughts and what we do with our lives and our environment to help grow in ways that are spiritually and cosmically aligned. And that it's really important to be aware of how we pray or how we work with our spirituality to keep ourselves aligned with the cosmos.
Thank you. Carolyn? You're muted. Carolyn, you're muted.
Still muted.
Lower left corner, your microphone button. Let's see. Carolyn, why don't I go on to Kim and see if you can unmute in the meantime?
So I was really touched by inspired by what David said about the big blobular computer program that now could be Legoified into Lego
Mm,
bricks.
nice.
And I was thinking that Lego bricks are universal. They can be used by anyone. And so maybe there are little seed ideas that we can use like Lego bricks and share with each other. Like maybe there's this big tradition of, I don't know what, Tai Chi or something. And then, but maybe there's some little tiny aspect of it that's like a Lego brick that I could remember and essentially have with me and use and share in the world. So that was a really potent idea, I thought, is break down a big structure into Lego bricks of nuggets of wisdom that are essential building blocks for our lives.
Lovely. Great. Carolyn.
Um, this is fantastic to have this opportunity. So I'm really grateful for Kim. I always like to hear her talk about science. Um, I would like to take a biology class for a couple of days from her. But I took chemistry and lots of that. But anyway, I'm really grateful that she and David and anyone else who can contribute something. I wish we did more investigation of what science has come up with. I don't know how they do it, but I certainly um, uh, appreciate their effort.
Indeed. Mary.
Life is magnificent. And thank you all for your contributions to my little brain, my pea brain that doesn't know a lot, but I can listen and I can appreciate. So thank you all.
Amen.
Amen. I think we will have a chance, Carolyn, to look at some of aspects of nature in this year of evolving with the cosmos. We have a lot of facets of nature, which we've, with the help of Malia's daughter, our Kumuhula, Malia, translated into Hawaiian. So we're going to have next week the sun, Kala. The week after that, on January 31st, actually, Malia will be our presenter for the moon, Ka Mahina. February 14th will be fire, Ke Ahi. We go down to close to Earth Day. On April 18th, we'll have the Earth, Ka Hunua. And it continues like that throughout the year. So I think we are going to be able to look at some of these aspects of nature from probably scientific perspective, also from maybe a poetic, maybe a symbolic perspective. So I'm kind of looking forward to exactly what you're talking about, I think. Is there somebody who would like to give a vote of thanks to Kim before we close?
Well, I could take a stab at it,
Please.
but I would like to preface it also with acknowledging everyone's contribution. Mary always brings the light of love in Christ into it, like Diana brings loving compassion, and Carolyn, thank you so much for the acknowledgement around the room, and Robert bringing beautiful questions for us all to ponder and to think about. And Kim always there to warp our minds, so to speak, and give us deep thoughts that can perhaps reconfigure our DNA to perhaps express in different ways as new thoughts. Really appreciate your scientific background and your wisdom, and then your ability to cross over into the spiritual domain and to the consciousness of love itself. So greatly appreciate your contributions here.
Yes, very
Thank you.
much.
It's a privilege to be here.
You're here. Thank you so much, all. I look forward to us announcing to you who's going to be presenting on the sun, Kala, next week. And if somebody has a recommendation, certainly open. I hope all of you are heading into a wonderful, wonderful 2026. Not just evolving with the cosmos, but giving it that little nudge forward. Thank you all so much, and great thanks to Kim today.
Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you.
Happy
Aloha.
New Year.
Happy New
Happy
Year.
New Year.
Happy New
Aole makahiki hao.
Year. Yes.
Robert jumped out so quickly before I could nominate him to talk about the sun, since he's the one who brought it up in today's conversation. But maybe you could hit him up personally about that. Yeah.
There you go. Good night, everyone.
Good
Good to see
night.
everyone.
Good night.
Aloha.
Aloha.